president. But Lyndon Johnson has other ideas.
With reference to the selection of the candidate for vice president on the Democratic ticket, I've reached the conclusion that it would be inadvisable for me to recommend to the convention any member of the cabinet or any of those who meet regularly with the cabinet.
I'm a little in awe looking out at all of you. I think of my own position as a member of the cabinet, and I look out at all of you as not members of the cabinet and people who don't meet with the cabinet and therefore eligible to be vice president. I sent a note to the various other cabinet members that said that my one great regret was having taken so many other nice fellows over the side with me.
Blocked in the administration, he resolves to carve out a new future in the Senate and turns to the state where he spent his childhood.
I shall resign from the cabinet to campaign for election. I shall devote all of my effort and all whatever talents that I possess to the state of New York. This I pledge.
Always the man behind the candidate, suddenly he is the candidate himself, plunged into the midst of the voters, attending to their voices, asking their support. But some question his credentials and his motives.
I remember the first time when Bobby announced he was running for the Senate, and if you recall, he came from Massachusetts, so I wrote a column and I said that Bobby had never been to New York. And so after he had announced, he decided to have Steve Smith, his brother-in-law, explain New York to him. And Steve Smith said, now, Bobby, up here's Staten Island, down here's the Bronx, and over here's the East River, and over here's the Hudson River. And in the column, Bobby said, well, that would make Manhattan an island, wouldn't it? Well, 2 days later, I ran into him, and he said, how many people take you seriously? I said, oh, about 50%. He says, then why don't you knock it off?
Mr. Kennedy, I'd like to ask you a question which seems to me very close to the heart of the matter, and if it sounds blunt, so be it. Aren't you really using New York State as a kind of jumping off place for your own presidential ambitions?
First, let me say I have really two choices over the period of the last 10 months. I could have stayed in, I could have retired. My father has done very well, and I could have lived off him. Frankly, I don't need the title, because I could be called general, I understand, for the rest of my life. And I don't need the money, and I don't need the office space. So I would just, I mean, frank as it is, and maybe it's difficult to understand in the state of New York, I'd like to just be a good United States Senator. I'd like to serve.
At 38, he wins his first election. A very junior senator, he cannot play a junior role. The times will not allow him, nor will his own activism permit him. Yet only one of 100 senators, imprisoned by committees and roll calls, confined mostly to the walls of the Senate. He chafes under the restraint.
We have no fancy panacea for raising $20 billion other than the way in which money is raised always.
We came here to demand that the U.S. get out of Vietnam, that the Navy not recruit on campus.
Outside, a new spirit of protest explodes in the land. A nation in turmoil questions its leadership.
Bring the troops home! Fight the gas! End the war! Bring the troops home!
The annual model change ritual is not meaningful innovation.
It's an oversimplification to try to figure out the cash contribution, particularly when you're talking...
The war in Vietnam is for the birds. Linda Bird, Lady Bird, Luna Bird.
Responding to pressures from within and without, able to stifle his voice no longer, Kennedy is drawn to the heart of the protest.
It is not enough to allow dissent. We must demand it. For there is much to dissent from. We dissent from the fact that millions are trapped in poverty while the nation grows rich. We dissent from the conditions and hatreds which deny a full life to our fellow citizens because of the color of his skin. We dissent from the monstrous absurdity of a world where nations stand poised to destroy one another, and men must kill their fellow men.
Such words draw blood. As he moves ahead into exposed ground, Lyndon Johnson launches a counterattack.
There will be some nervous Nellies, and some who will become frustrated and bothered and break ranks under the strain. And some will turn on their leaders and on their country and on our own fighting men.
Senator, Time magazine is running an article this week that says you and President Johnson had some pretty stern disagreements, but that he said if you persisted in that line, it would end your political career rapidly. Have you read this, or have you any comment?
I just looked at it briefly. No, the story that I read in Time magazine was inaccurate.
In what ways is it inaccurate?
Well, I'm not going to go into the details. It was inaccurate and not true.
Do you feel there is any way that the president could take steps to abbreviate your political career, sir?
I don't think he's probably interested in that. I think what we have to accept is what President Kennedy said in 1963. This is their war. We can help them, but we can't win it for them. And I think over the period of the last 3 years, we've decided that we can win it for them, that it's a war of attrition, as General Westmoreland said. We'll kill 10 of them for every one they kill of us, and therefore we'll win. I don't think that's a policy that makes any sense, and I don't think that it'll have any success.
Please be our next president.
Pressing his attack on the war is folly and shame. He strikes a national nerve.
Everyone here in California wants you.
By the fall of 1967, the cry rises across the country that he must run for president.
The nation needs you now.
Now the ordeal of decision. If he is the first to challenge Johnson, Kennedy fears his battle would seem not a protest against Vietnam, but a private vendetta against an overburdened president. His conscience, his activism say he should run. The prudence of politics say no. Among those who entreat him to run is Allard Lowenstein.
I went to Senator Kennedy in the fall several times, and the conversation that sticks out in my mind was when he, looking really quite troubled about it, said, I just can't do it. It can't be put together. Mayor so-and-so won't support it, and so-and-so and so-and-so are tell me it won't work. And I looked at him and said, well, Senator Kennedy, you'll understand that those of us that feel the honor and the future of this country are at stake are going to have to do it anyway. If you won't go, we're going to have to go to Senator McCarthy or other people and make this fight, because there's too much at stake, win or lose. And I believe we're going to win, and that you could have been president of the United States, and I think it's a tragedy that you weren't ready to do it, because if you would, you'd be the man that could make the greatest difference to this country. And he looked progressively more unhappy as I was talking, and when I finished, I turned and started to walk out of the room, and he came over behind me, put his hand on my shoulder, and said, I wish I could, and looked as unhappy as I've ever seen him look.
Meeting the demand for a peace candidate, Senator Eugene McCarthy challenges the administration and enters the New Hampshire presidential primary. To the nation's surprise, McCarthy and his amateurs set Lyndon Johnson back in New Hampshire. The young acquire a new hero.
We said 68 was the year. I think that March the 12th was the day.
As the